powered by Riverside FM.
Is your name and address confidential information? If you think yes, reflect that all your neighbours, your friends, your family, and especially your postman know and see this regularly. If you think no, then would you really be comfortable with a company potentially sharing it at will and it being publicly available? And why do we have privacy laws that govern the handling of such data? These questions were sparked because this week, the popular UK supermarket chain, Marks & Spencer, commonly known as M&S, admitted that its customers' personal data had been taken in a cybersecurity breach. The breach happened several weeks ago, but details had been sketchy until now. M&S has now confirmed that customers' personal information, such as their name, date of birth, telephone number, home address, email address, and online order history, has indeed been taken. The incident has been hugely detrimental to M&S itself, forcing it to suspend all online orders. But how worried should customers be? M&S has tried to reassure people by saying there's no need for them to take any action. Instead, they've simply said that once a user relogs into their account, they'll just be asked to reset their password. This does not seem wholly reassuring. Surely, many customers will be concerned about the loss of their data and its potential misuse. It has led me to reflect on how confidential that data is anyway. First, I recognize that any of those individual bits of data in isolation are not very meaningful. A date of birth is just a date. An address is just an address. Rather, it is the combination of bits of data that raise a concern. And the main concern being that it is a combination of data that is often used as a security measure, i.e. once you have access to sufficient breadth of data about a person, you may be able to access or sign up for other services. In some instances, only a very limited amount has been needed. I've heard some anecdotes of individuals who have been past victims of scams, for example, where high interest rate loans were taken out in their name solely on the basis of knowledge of their name, address, and date of birth. This is clearly an example of inadequate security measures at the companies that issue those loans. But it is also an example of why some customers might be concerned. It's reasonable to assume that data required to sign up for a service will be protected by the company that we give it to in order to present exactly this, unauthorized registration with other services. However, so far, this covers information about the individual themselves. Name, address, date of birth all seem to be legitimately assignable to the individual. However, returning to the M&S incident, there was one piece of data which I think is more debatable. M&S said that customers' online purchase history had also been accessed. It made me wonder, is that confidential information? For example, if I was to purchase physical goods in a supermarket, that information would be available to anyone who could observe. Similarly, as a company, data on what I am selling to an individual must surely also be partially my own data. I have to have a way of monitoring my own sales. This kind of issue becomes particularly thorny in the online world, where companies wish to use data on how users behave, for example, what they click on, which adverts they react with, to try and influence and change the experience. This is particularly true on websites which host advertising and social media sites. Some authorities have objected to this, either because it's unauthorized use of a customer's data, or in some cases because of the competition concerns it might arise. This is similar to the issue that the European Court of Justice grappled with in its recent decision against Meta, the owner of Facebook and Instagram. There, the authority determined that Meta was no longer allowed to use personal data, including that garnered from public sources, for the purposes of targeting advertising or aggregating and analyzing customer behavior.
This is part of a wider pattern of increasing rules coming in to protect consumers and to protect data privacy. However, it seems unlikely that any measures that authorities put in place will be able to adequately keep up with the ever-growing availability of data.